The first time Scripture mentions him, he is simply a nephew. A young man following a far older and far braver one. His name was Lot. He lived in a world held together by tents and livestock, by wandering roads and shifting alliances. A world where promises were fragile, and survival depended on the choices a man made, even when he did not know he was choosing. But every story has a beginning. And Lot's story begins with a journey. The land of Ur had once been familiar to Lot, its markets, its voices, its stone houses warmed by the sun. But one day, his uncle Abram, later called Abraham, received a call that would break every pattern Lot knew. God spoke to Abraham, "Leave your country, and go to the land I will show you." Abraham obeyed, and Lot followed. The journey westward was slow. Days bled into weeks, and weeks into months. Herds grazed over open plains. Nights cooled and stars appeared, stars uncountable, even to a young man who dreamed big dreams. To Lot, following Abraham felt like standing near a warm fire. There was safety in Abraham's faith, direction in Abraham's certainty. Where Abraham went, Lot went. Where he pitched his tent, Lot pitched his beside it. Sometimes in life, it feels easier to follow the faith of someone else rather than cultivate our own. That was Lot's beginning, faith by association. But beginnings never tell the whole story. Time passed. Lot prospered. His herds grew large, so large that the land could not sustain both his and Abraham's animals side by side. Their servants quarreled in the fields over grazing rights and water. Abraham approached Lot with an offer few elder patriarchs would ever make. "Let us not quarrel. If you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left." This was the first great turning point of Lot's life, a choice. And choices, silent though they may seem, are often the hinges of destiny. Lot looked. The plains of Jordan shimmered green and lush. Rivers coiled through the valley like silver threads. Fields bloomed with promise. To the east, near the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, the land looked almost like Eden itself. Lot did not pray. He did not ask counsel. He did not consider the spiritual climate of the place, only its prosperity. So, Lot chose the valley. Sometimes, the greatest missteps in life are not the result of rebellion, but of reasoning without discernment. Of choosing what seems best, not what is wise. Lot moved his tents toward Sodom. And Sodom was a city steeped in wickedness. But it is rarely the first step that ruins a man, it is the direction of the steps. At first, Lot lived outside the city. Tents still marked his life. The sky above him still open, the horizon still wide. But over time, the lure of the city pulled him in. Trade was good there, business was brisk, wealth moved from hand to hand like water. And Lot, who once followed Abraham, now settled among the gates of Sodom, where elders traded influence and power. Environment shapes appetite, and appetite shapes decisions. Sodom was a place where morality was mocked, righteousness was strange, and virtue was a foreign language. Yet Lot remained, not because he agreed, but because leaving would cost him more than he was willing to lose. Compromise often begins quietly, not with rebellion, but with tolerance. Not with disobedience, but with convenience. Lot built a life in Sodom. A house, a family, a reputation. But the cost was steep, even though he could not see it yet. Far away, Abraham stood on higher ground, not just geographically, but spiritually. He prayed, interceded, pleaded for the city where his nephew now lived. One day, two angels, disguised as travelers, entered Sodom. Lot saw them at the city gate and invited them into his home. Perhaps some part of him still remembered hospitality, still remembered righteousness, still remembered Abraham. But when night fell, the streets filled with the noise of wicked men demanding the visitors be brought out. The house trembled under pounding fists and vile shouts. Lot stepped outside. "Do not do this wicked thing," he begged. But his voice was drowned in the chaos. In desperation, he offered alternatives, choices as tragic as the situation itself. Even a righteous man, when shaped by a corrupt environment, may find his judgment warped. The angels intervened. The door shut, light flashed, and the men outside were struck blind. This was no longer negotiation. It was rescue. The angels spoke plainly. "Get out of this place, for the Lord will destroy the city." Lot hesitated. Hesitation, so small, so human, nearly cost him everything. The angel seized his hand, the hand of his wife, and the hands of his daughters, and they led them out, the way a parent pulls a child from an approaching fire. Outside the city, the dawn was beginning. Smoke curled in the distance. The air tasted of urgency. Escape for your life, they warned. Do not look back. They ran, feet pounding the earth, hearts pounding their ribs. Behind them, judgment fell, fire and brimstone swallowing the valley that once looked like paradise. Lot's wife looked back, and became a pillar of salt. Some glances cost more than they reveal. She had left the city, but the city had not left her. Her heart was still there. Lot kept running until he reached the small town of Zor. Then, later, the mountains. There, the man who once lived among wealth now sheltered in caves. The plains he chose for prosperity had become ashes, and the choice that once seemed rational now bore bitter fruit. Scripture records the aftermath with painful honesty. Lot's daughters, believing the world ended in fire, acted out of fear and confusion, choices that birthed nations who would later war against Israel. Lot's story ends not with grandeur, but with sobering silence. A warning that decisions echo beyond the moment, sometimes beyond a lifetime. But even in this, mercy threads through the narrative. Lot was not abandoned. He was rescued, not because he was perfect, but because God remembered Abraham. Sometimes we are spared not by our wisdom, but by someone else's intercession. By the prayers of a grandparent, a parent, a pastor, a friend. Mercy is often quiet, but never weak. Lot's story is not just ancient history, it is a mirror. Because life still presents the same crossroads. Where will you pitch your tent? What will you value? Whose influence will shape your decisions? The land near Sodom still looks green today. Opportunities that glimmer with promise, careers that promise prestige, environments that reward ambition. But beneath the surface lies a subtle question. What will this cost your soul? Lot teaches us that what you choose is not just about where you live, but who you become. Environment forms appetite. Appetite shapes compromise. And compromise births consequences. Yet in all of it, God's mercy remains. Perhaps the most relatable part of Lot's story is how ordinary his motivations were. He did not seek rebellion. He sought prosperity, security, influence, comfort. But comfort without discernment becomes captivity. Lot reminds us that spiritual drift rarely feels dramatic from the inside. It feels reasonable, sensible, logical, until it becomes irreversible. But there is also hope in his story. Hope that God intervenes. Hope that God rescues. Hope that God does not abandon those caught between choices and consequences. And hope that we are never beyond mercy. Lot's story asks a quiet but persistent question. What direction are your decisions pulling you? Not just today, but slowly, gradually, imperceptibly, because the tents we pitch now become the cities we live in later. And sometimes, the greatest act of wisdom is choosing not what looks best, but what leads to life. If this story has spoken to you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. Ask yourself, where am I pitching my tent? What influences are shaping my decisions? And who am I becoming because of them? If you're navigating choices, big or small, know this. God still guides. He still rescues. He still draws people away from destruction and toward life. If this message encouraged you, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone who may be wrestling with direction or compromise, and subscribe to the channel for more biblical stories told with clarity, meaning, and depth. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. What part of Lot's story stood out to you? Was it the choice, the compromise, the mercy, or the rescue? Your perspective may encourage someone else's faith journey. And remember this, the direction of your choices matters, because the places you settle shape the person you become. So, choose wisely, choose life, and choose God.